In my past life, in order to stay alive, I once cast aside all my dignity to please the Regent. Unexpectedly, after being reborn, I met him at the lowest point of his life. To evade the assassins pursuing him, Xie Yunhan had fallen into destitution and become a beggar. Forced to snatch food from wild dogs, my maid tugged at my sleeve and timidly said, "Miss, don't go over there. His eyes are all red, he's terrifying." I walked up to him and still handed him the pancake in my hand. He was starving. He took a bite of the pancake and still stared at me with that eerie look in his eyes. I slapped him across the face and said, "Did you say thank you?" The maid saw me slap a beggar and looked utterly shocked. "Miss, have you lost your mind?" I naturally wasn't crazy. Besides, if I didn't avenge a grudge, wouldn't my rebirth have been for nothing? After that slap, even my palm was numb. The maid Xiaohong behind me was so frightened that she cried out, "Miss, have you gone crazy?" A clear 5-finger mark had even appeared on Xie Yunhan's dirty face. If this had been in my previous life, I would have already been killed by him, dead and gone. Unfortunately, right now, the exalted regent was still just a fugitive. The soldiers patrolling the city were walking this way, their weapons and armor clashing with crisp sounds. Xie Yunhan slightly lowered his eyes, suppressing the cold, sharp killing intent in his dark pupils, and said softly, "Thank you." Hearing that, I smiled in satisfaction. "I am very pleased." I dusted off the dirt on my hands, then took out a few taels of broken silver from my purse and tossed them in front of him, smiling at him. "It's all for you. If you want to repay this kindness in the future, remember that I am the legitimate young lady of the Song family, Song Yuelian." After the porridge distribution was over, sitting in the carriage back to the estate, Xiaohong couldn't help but ask me, "Miss, why did you just say you were the eldest young lady?" I smiled. "I'm here on behalf of my legitimate elder sister to distribute porridge, so any good reputation should naturally go to her. Of course, if there is any retribution in the future, it should naturally fall on her as well." Xiaohong sighed and said worriedly, "I wonder whether the eldest young lady's cold has gotten better." I held the hand warmer in my arms, the corners of my lips curving into a cold smile. "Of course she's perfectly fine. In my previous life, at this very time," after hurriedly helping Song Yuelian finish distributing the porridge, I had been worried about her cold, and on the way back to the manor, when I passed Zuyu Pavilion, I specially bought a bowl of brown sugar fermented rice wine that she liked, warming it over a brazier in the carriage all the way home. I carried the warm fermented rice wine to her courtyard, but there was no maid standing guard at the door of her room. I pushed the door open and walked straight in. Through layers of red gauze curtains, I saw a half-naked man. I was so frightened that I smashed the porcelain bowl in my hand, and as I screamed, the man who ran over clamped a hand tightly over my mouth. Song Lianyue lightly adjusted the gauze robe that had slipped down to her shoulders and gave the man a look. The man shoved a pill into my mouth. Before I lost consciousness and fainted, I recognized that man as the stable hand in the manor, Cheng Kang. When I woke again, I found myself locked in the woodshed. Outside the woodshed came the maid's cries of alarm. Taking advantage of the chaos, Cheng Kang pretended to run into the back courtyard from outside. He exclaimed that he had seen a man climbing over the wall and escaping. Song Lianyue, together with her legal mother, kicked open the woodshed door and caught me just as I was disheveled and half-dressed. Everyone in the household was saying that I had been carrying on an illicit affair with a man, because my mother had once been caught committing adultery with a man and was drowned in a pig cage. I was her biological daughter, so of course I had the same character as she did. Song Lianyue looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Linga, you've been by my side since you were 5, and I never expected you to do something so disgraceful and ruin our family's reputation. I don't have a younger sister like you." No matter how I tried to explain, no one believed me. Song Lianyue would always be the Song family's legitimate daughter, so pure and noble that not a speck of dust could stain her. My father, in order to preserve the Song family's good name, gave me a strip of white silk and told me to end my own life. Xiaohong stole the keys from the steward and secretly let me go. I crawled out through the dog hole in the back courtyard and fled. After fleeing the manor, I was penniless. I was tricked by a human trafficker with 2 steamed buns and sold off to work as a menial maid. Later, after many twists and turns, I made my way to the capital and slipped into the imperial selection, using every possible scheme to climb to the position of noble consort. By the time I wanted revenge, the Song residence had already long since fallen apart, having lived through the storms of palace intrigue and political upheaval in my previous life. Revenge for me now was as easy as taking it in hand too. After returning to the manor, I quietly became the second young lady of the Song residence. I stayed indoors all day, never stepping out of the front or back gates, and devoted myself to protecting Song Lianyue when she sneaked off for trysts. I kept watch at the door when she carried on in secret. I delivered the message she eloped, and I moved the ladder in the dead of night. Song Lianyue sat astride the high wall, tears in her eyes, looking at me with overwhelming gratitude. Linga, your sister will never forget you. Holding the ladder steady, I looked up at her and smiled. Sister, of course you can't forget me. After all, I've remembered you for 2 lifetimes. She didn't understand what I meant and tilted her head slightly to look at me. The night was as dark as ink. In the distance, specks of light appeared. As the lights drew nearer, I realized they were officers from the Yamen running over with torches in hand. I was the one who had someone report it to the authorities. The Song residents had lost quite a few banknotes, pieces of jewelry, and land deeds. Some of the missing valuables were found on the slave Cheng Kang, and the rest were searched out. From the bundle carried by Song Lianyue, my father quickly arrived at the county office with the principal wife. Liu Zhizhou was Song Lianyue's maternal uncle, and knowing that my father cared most about saving face, he had the matter tried only late at night, not revealing a single word to the outside. When Song Lianyue saw her parents, she did not dare make a sound. The principal wife asked her several times, but got nothing out of her. The stepmother could only look at me. Linga, you're usually the closest to Lianyue. What exactly happened? Tell me. I glanced at Cheng Kang, who was pinned to the ground by the constables, and before I could speak, Song Lianyue cut in ahead of me. It was Song Chuling. I saw her trying to elope with the stable boy Cheng Kang, and I was trying to persuade her at the time. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Yes, when my sister was persuading me, she was still wearing a maid's outfit. My father wasn't stupid either. On the way here, he had already gotten a rough idea of the whole story. The dirty water Song Lianyue had tried to splash on me didn't end up on me after all. Instead, she herself admitted to the disgraceful affair of eloping. Enraged beyond measure, my father raised his hand and slapped Song Lianyue across the face. You've done something so disgraceful yourself, and you still dare to frame your own younger sister. I pinched my own thigh hard before I could force out 2 tears. Sister, they even found the letters you wrote to Cheng Kang on him. There's no way father can be kept in the dark about this. My father took the letter handed over by the servant, read a couple of lines, and couldn't help but slap Song Lianyue across the face again. This is your handwriting. How dare you deny it? Song Lianyue looked at the explicit words she had written in the letter, and was so ashamed and enraged she wished she could die. Father, please don't beat her anymore. The legal wife hugged Song Lianyue and cried her heart out. Lianyue has always been obedient since childhood. She must have been deceived by someone, which is why she committed such a terrible act. I hurriedly chimed in. Yes, eldest sister must have been deceived by Cheng Kang. Cheng Kang should be the one put in a pig cage first. No, no. At this, Song Lianyue shouted with red eyes. I'm carrying his child. If he dies, then your daughter won't live either. My stepmother looked at her belly in utter disbelief. My father was so enraged that he nearly fainted. The scene was truly a spectacle. If only there had been a dish of sunflower seeds next to me. 3 In my previous life, it wasn't until the palace spread the news of the grand selection of palace maidens that Song Lianyue finally gathered the courage to run away with her lover, to save face. My father lied to the outside world that Song Lianyue had died of illness. To silence the rumors spreading outside, they killed a maid, disfigured her face, and held a funeral for Song Lianyue. The maid they killed was my Xiao Hong. So this time, I gave Song Lianyue some medicine that would make her think she had become pregnant, forcing her to run away with Cheng Kang. At this very moment, Song Lianyue threatened suicide to protect Cheng Kang and the child in her womb. The legitimate mother held her and cried bitterly through the night. Early the next morning, news spread through every street and alley that the Song family's legitimate young lady had run away with a stable boy. When I went to visit Song Lianyue in her room, dried blood was still left on her forehead. It was likely from when she had made a scene and banged her head against the wall last night. My father was so angry that he was bedridden and could only survive on ginseng soup. Song Lianyue looked at me with red-rimmed eyes, her voice hoarse. Linga, in this situation, you're the only one who can save your sister. I curled my lips into a cold smile. At this point, if a younger sister didn't stab her older sister a couple more times, that would already count as kind. She went on, I don't know whether you've heard, but that matter has already spread. Although I was the one who spread it, I still shook my head. How could that be? I am the legitimate daughter of the Song family, and the face of the Song household, yet now I've caused such a disaster. And father is so angry that he's fallen ill. The only course of action now is for you to take this matter on behalf of your sister, marry Cheng Kang, and preserve the Song family's reputation and my child in my womb. The matriarch hurriedly added, don't worry, as long as you admit to this matter, we will certainly not treat you unfairly. I will also prepare your dowry according to the standards of a legitimate daughter. You are only a concubine-born daughter. To be able to marry out with such pomp is already a blessing. Even now, they still hadn't forgotten to make me take the blame for Song Lianyue. I wasn't angry at all. I only said with a smiling face, all right, sister. The news that Cheng Kang and I were to be married soon spread quickly, and the rumors about Song Lianyue also died away. My stepmother prepared to send Song Lianyue to a convent outside the city to give birth, and publicly claimed that she had gone there to pray for my father's blessings. The Song family's honor was more or less preserved, and my father was finally able to force down a few spoonfuls of porridge before Song Lianyue left. She wanted to see Cheng Kang one last time, so she asked me to help deliver a letter for her. Holding my hand tightly, she looked magnanimous and composed. Linga, don't worry, this time I just want to cut ties with him face to face. From now on, he will only be your husband. I sneered inwardly. You two already have a child, and you still want to cut ties cleanly. I took the letter, then copied it in Song Lianyue's handwriting and handed it to Cheng Kang that night. Song Lianyue waited outside the city gate all night, but never saw Cheng Kang because Cheng Kang, under cover of night, slipped past the guards and went to the side residence's bedchamber. Before long, a woman's scream rang out from inside. The guards quickly surrounded the bedchamber. A skilled guard kicked the door open and caught Cheng Kang with my stepmother, whose clothes were in disarray. After my father fell ill, my stepmother cared for him day and night, and would occasionally rest for a while in the side residence. I rushed forward, hurriedly draping an outer garment over my stepmother, who was not fully lucid, and lowered my head to whisper softly in her ear. Does the scene before your eyes feel somewhat familiar? You once used this same sordid trick to frame my birth mother. When I was in the palace in my previous life, I came to understand many things I had not been able to figure out when I was young. At first, mother did not confess guilt. After my legitimate mother took me to the dungeon to see her once, she suddenly admitted everything. Only when I grew up did I understand. It was because my life was in my legitimate mother's hands, and my mother had traded her life for mine. Now Song Lianyue's life, and even the entire Song family, are in my hands, so my legitimate mother has no choice but to admit to this crime. For, after this incident, my father was so furious that he suffered a stroke and was left half paralyzed in bed. He had taken only one concubine besides his lawful wife when she was pregnant, my mother, and he had only two daughters, Song Lianyue and me. Just like that, the Song family fell easily into my hands. I took my mother back to our hometown and rebuilt her grave. My stepmother once said she was willing to kneel before my mother's grave to confess her guilt, asking only that I spare her and Song Lianyue, but I have never believed in any talk of confession or repentance. Only if she suffered the same fate as my mother and felt the same pain would that count as atonement. As the seasons came and went, the days drifted by in utter boredom, one after another. Then, one day, news came from the capital that the palace would select the legitimate daughter of the Song family to enter as a palace maiden. Song Lianyue was brought back from the nunnery by the elders of the Song family. Over the past 2 years, She had weathered many hardships, and even with a thick layer of powder on her face, it could not conceal the rough marks on her skin. As soon as she got out of the sedan chair, she glared at me fiercely. Song Chuling, I know everything you've done, and I won't let you get away with it. You faked a pregnancy, angered father to death, drove madam to madness, and killed Cheng Kang. I lightly adjusted my hair and looked up at her. You've done so many things. Sister, which one are you talking about? Song Lianyue trembled all over with rage, clutching her embroidered handkerchief so tightly that her fingertips nearly drew blood. Someone, take this poisonous woman away and beat her to death. As soon as the words fell, the servants around them did not move at all. I laughed. Sister, take a careful look. Do you see any old acquaintances in this Song residence? The song in the Song residence has long since become the song of Song Chuling. Behind me, she shouted, Song Chuling, just you wait. I will definitely enter the palace and become a consort. And I will definitely get my revenge. I didn't even bother to turn my head back. You'd better wash up and go to sleep early. That night, Xiaohong helped me wash up and dress, her brows and eyes full of worry. Miss, I asked around with the laundry women near the nunnery, and it turns out Song Lianyue rescued a fallen courtesan 2 months ago. I heard that courtesan not only taught her how to get past the palace's body inspection, but also taught her quite a few tricks for seducing men. If she really wins favor someday, then miss, don't worry, she's going to the capital to die, and your miss is doing just fine. I patted the back of her hand. You should be thinking about your marriage to your cousin instead. I've already prepared your dowry. The young maid had a thin skin. Just a teasing remark made her blush. Once you're married, I can finally go to the capital with peace of mind. What are you going to do in the capital? Miss, I'm tired of playing here, so I'm going to the capital to have a little fun as an empress. Xiaohong stared at me wide-eyed for a long time without saying a word. What's wrong? Don't believe your young lady can become an empress. No, it's just that after all these years by the lady's side, I've come to feel that there's nothing the lady can't accomplish. I just didn't expect that the lady would actually want to become empress. In my past life, I was only one step away from the position of empress, but I didn't have to become empress. It was just that at this moment, if I still did not enter the city, my future husband might very well die. Not long after Xiaohong got married, Song Lianyue and I set off for the capital. I rode in a comfortable carriage, while Song Lianyue could only squeeze into the carriage behind with the servants. When we stopped by the roadside to rest, she lifted the curtain and glared fiercely at me. Song Chuling, one day, I will kill you. I bit into the roasted chicken leg. You should be worrying about whether I'll poison you, then impersonate you and enter the palace. When Song Lianyue heard me say that, she was so frightened that she didn't even dare take a sip of water. Hungry, she climbed a tree in the middle of the night to pick wild fruit to eat. She looked utterly foolish. Even if she entered the palace later, she would only end up being played to death by me. Everyone knew that the old emperor favored women with slim waists, and Song Lianyue, in order to maintain her figure, ate only liquid food every day. Her waist was so slender it could be encircled with a single hand. It was said that she had learned many courtesan tricks from a fallen flower queen, so she firmly believed that she would be more favored than those restrained ladies of noble families. However, very few people knew that by then the old emperor was already gravely ill and had only a few days left to live. Once the old emperor passed away, these newly entered palace maids would all be buried with him. In my previous life, the young lady of the family to which I had been sold by a human trafficker heard this and fled overnight. With no other choice, the master had me take her place and enter the palace. I was lucky. The old emperor died before I entered the palace. In the end, I became a consort of the new emperor. The future emperor was now the 5-year-old crown prince, Xie Yuncheng. To please him, on the journey to the capital I learned how to make straw crafts and sugar figurines, and I also bought a few storybooks. In my past life, among all the imperial concubines, only I could lull Xie Yuncheng to sleep. I didn't even dare imagine how favored I would be after entering the palace this time. Now that I had learned so many new skills in this life, I took a bite of the candied hawthorn skewer, and the flavor was sweet and tangy this time. After entering the palace, becoming the most favored in the harem was simply just around the corner. Before long, The day of entering the palace had arrived. Song Lianyue swayed her hips and, just as she stepped through the palace gates, was taken by the head stewardess and sent to the cold palace. She had not yet reacted when she screamed in panic, "I'm not going to the cold palace. That place is no place for humans to live in. I don't want to be a concubine anymore. Let me go, let me go." Even those who had spent their whole lives in the imperial harem had never once seen a young lady chosen for the palace who was sent to the cold palace the moment she entered the gates. Only I know that the reason Song Lianyue has what she has today should be that slap I gave Xie Yunhan that day. Because of my framing, Song Lianyue was destined to meet a miserable fate, but I didn't expect Xie Yunhan to strike so quickly. That bastard really does repay every slight with vengeance. In this life, I must stay far away from him. Before entering the palace, I went to the Jiang residence, just as in my previous life. I entered the palace under the identity of Jiang Waning, the legitimate daughter of Magistrate Jiang. After 2 months of learning the rules and etiquette, it was finally my turn to attend the emperor in his bedchamber. I knelt properly in the middle of the bedchamber, eyes lowered, and said, "Your Majesty, I can weave grasshoppers out of cattail leaves. Would you like to see?" From behind the yellow curtains came a man's cold snort. "You don't seem like it, but you're quite full of tricks." A chill spread from my spine throughout my body, and I couldn't help shivering. When I looked up, I saw Xie Yunhan walking toward me from behind the drapes. Xie Yunhan met my dazed gaze. "What? Don't recognize me anymore?" He was dressed in a bright yellow, gilded robe, his whole body carrying the innate majesty of an emperor. "If you don't know me, then why did you slap me that day?" He watched with satisfaction as my expression gradually crumbled, his thin lips softly murmuring my name, Song Chuling. I suddenly realized, he had also been reborn 6. After Xie Yunhan was reborn, he ascended the throne and became the new emperor. Half of the candles in the bedchamber had been extinguished, and the flickering light and shadows were reflected in his dim eyes. He pinched my chin, studying my expression with amusement. In a trembling voice, I asked, "You deliberately kept me in the dark about your ascension to the throne. Otherwise, how could I have waited for you to come to me on your own?" "My dear consort, Your Majesty, where is Xie Yunchen? In your last life, you protected him. In this life, you're still protecting him." His brows were filled with a grim, vicious aura. "What? Want to go be buried with him?" I clutched his sleeve. "It was wrong of me to use you in my past life. He's just a child, so don't take his life." A cold sneer spilled from the corners of Xie Yunhan's lips. "You knew to seek revenge after being reborn, so why would you think I wouldn't take revenge on you? I had only been reborn for 3 years, and I never expected to die this soon." I couldn't hold back my tears, and they fell onto Xie Yunhan's hand. "Stop crying." His brows were tightly knit as he barked impatiently. "I haven't even made a move yet, since I was going to die anyway. I might as well stop being afraid of him." All the grievances in my heart poured out at once. Several times when I was almost killed, he was the one who stood in front of me and protected me. So many people wanted his throne and his life. What's wrong with me protecting him? If I had wanted to harm you, I would have done it long ago. But I even gave you travel money. You also gave me a slap. Xie Yunhan's eyes darkened, and he suddenly let out a laugh. "And you wouldn't even admit it, using your legitimate elder sister's name. He probably would never forget that slap for the rest of his life." Thinking back, I really had quite the audacity back then. I didn't know how to defend myself, so I could only roll my eyes back and faint. Everything went black before my eyes, and I heard Xie Yunhan let out a cold laugh. Terrible acting. I was sent back to the imperial bedchamber. I didn't dare open my eyes. Dazed and groggy, I actually fell asleep. In my dream, I saw scenes from my past life. Xie Yuncheng's small body was clad in a dragon robe, sitting upright on the throne in the great hall. He could not understand a single word of what those ministers were saying, and he did not dare move at all. When court was dismissed and it was time for the meal, I ladled him a bowl of milk custard and coaxed him softly. "Your Majesty, you must eat well if you want to grow taller and grow up quickly." Xie Yuncheng looked up at me and asked, "Sister, can I still grow up?" Even though he was still just a child, he could sense the perilous and unpredictable turmoil in the air. Xie Yunshan's maternal uncle was the illustrious General Shun, who had earned countless military merits. In order to help his son-in-law Xie Yunbi rise to power, Prime Minister Liu colluded with foreign invaders, causing General Shun and his two sons to die beyond the frontier, and the Shun clan fell into decline as a result. Xie Yunchen had no more relatives in this world, and no one to rely on now. He was merely a puppet that could be killed at any moment. After Xie Yunbi gained power, he ran rampant in the palace, abusing his authority and acting as he pleased. Countless palace maids and concubines were violated and killed by him and his underlings. Everyone knew he was a beast. Every time we ran into him, Xie Yunchen would stand in front of me, not letting him come within half a step of me. He stood where he was without moving, his eyes half narrowed as his gaze roamed over me. Sticky and greasy, revolting to the extreme. Consort, as the rumors say, you are indeed stunningly beautiful. I knew that Xie Yunbi would eventually make a move on me, but I never expected him to be so brazen as to strike in broad daylight. He killed the palace maid on duty and barged into my bedchamber, pinning me down tightly against the dressing table. Hairpins and bangles were scattered all over the floor. I thought I was probably not going to make it this time. Xie Yunchen couldn't protect me. Then I would try to see whether I could protect him. I pulled a hairpin from my hair and, before he could react, stabbed it down hard. Xie Yunbi cried out and let go of me. Blood soaked over most of his face, covering his eyes. He screamed on the ground in agony before his men could rush in. I climbed out the window and ran. At that time, Xie Yunhan was the only prince who had not bowed down and submitted to Xie Yunbi. I knelt before Xie Yunhan, trembling all over, and told him that I was willing to do anything to stay alive. That night, I stayed in his room. Everyone around him found it strange. Xie Yunhan was well known for not being interested in beauty. Some court officials, in an attempt to curry favor with him, had sent many beauties to his residence, only for them to be turned away. Yet he kept me by his side. I suppose it's probably because those beauties wouldn't drug him. Xie Yunbi almost died because of that stab from me. During the more than half a year he spent bedridden, Xie Yunhan killed many people, built up his own power, and became the regent who held sway over the court and the nation. Everyone cursed me as a wicked seductress who brought ruin to the country, colluded with the regent, and manipulated the affairs of state. But Xie Yunhan knew in his heart that no matter how obedient I was before him, the one I truly sided with was not him. The close ministers by his side urged him to kill me, because one day I would become the greatest threat at his side. That day, he gripped my throat, the force of his fingertips gradually tightening. I stared into his dark eyes and told him that I was pregnant. He summoned the imperial physician to take my pulse, and the physician found I was pregnant. After that night, he never came to see me again. Not long after, the world fell into chaos. Xie Yunbi led his troops into the palace, fighting all the way to the main hall. The palace was engulfed in raging flames, reddening the night sky. The eunuchs and palace maids fled in all directions, while hoofbeats, the sounds of swords and arrows, and screams continued without end. I was wearing Xie Yunshan's robe and was taken before Xie Yunbi. The eye I had stabbed blind was covered with a black eye patch, and his other eye looked at me with such hatred that he seemed ready to kill me. Where did you hide the little emperor? Not speaking. Fine, I have plenty of time to torment you. Don't want me to touch you? Fine, then I'll hand you over to the soldiers under my command. Xie Yunbi instructed his men. Feel free to do whatever you want with the imperial consort, but don't kill her. Leave her with a breath left in her. I'm going to make that bitch wish she were dead. I braced both hands on the ground and laughed breathlessly. You vile thief, you should be thanking me for sparing one of your eyes back then, so that today you can sit in high office and watch the show. All these years, I've regretted day and night that I wasn't ruthless enough that day, that I didn't drive that hairpin in a little deeper and take your life. Over these past few years, no one dared mention the eye Xie Yunbi lost in front of him. He was completely infuriated by me, his expression almost mad. Guards, gouge out this bitch's eyes, cut off her limbs, and make her into a human pig. I kept mocking him. Even if you grind me to dust and scatter my ashes, you'll still only have one eye left. If you ascend the throne, then our great Yin dynasty will have its first one-eyed emperor. Yunbi directly took up the knife and was about to strike me. At the very instant the blade fell, an arrow sliced past the hair at the side of my face and pierced Yunbi's anger-red single eye. I slowly turned my head and saw Yunhan charging in on horseback, clad in armor and holding a bow. He grabbed the back of my collar and hoisted me up onto the horse. I lay sprawled over the galloping horse's back, and for the first time, I wasn't frightened enough to scream. He was already lying in ambush at the city gate, waiting for Yunbi. So why did he still take the risk of entering the palace? I couldn't make sense of it, and I no longer had time to think about it. My whole body was weak and limp. I struggled to crawl up onto him and, looking up, said to him, Yunhan, I'm not pregnant. I drugged myself in order to survive. He lowered his eyes and glanced at me, then sneered, What, didn't die just now, so now you want to die by my hand? Inside the palace, corpses piled up like mountains, blood flowed across the ground, and arrows fell like rain. A sharp whistle cut past my ear. I threw myself against his chest, and the flying arrow pierced my back. Blood kept surging from my mouth and nose. Through my blood-veiled vision, I looked at Yunhan, whose face was filled with disbelief. Even I couldn't believe that I had actually shielded him from the arrow. I took poison a long time ago, and it won't be long before the poison takes effect. I'm not afraid of death. I'm only afraid that I won't be able to withstand torture and will end up revealing His Majesty's whereabouts. Yunhan, why the hell did I have to block an arrow for you, you bastard? It fucking hurts so much. 7. When I woke from the dream, I was filled with regret. I had acted for a lifetime in front of Yunhan, and just before dying, I suddenly no longer wanted to keep acting. If I had known he had also been reborn, then when I shielded him from the arrow in my previous life, I should have put on a deeply affectionate expression, but now it was too late to act. Yunhan had only recently ascended the throne, and the realm was not yet settled. He was very busy every day. I thought he wouldn't remember me for a while, but to my surprise he summoned me to dine with him that very evening. He was wearing a set of purple casual robes, just as in my previous life. You still look best in purple. What? Do you think I'm not fit to wear a dragon robe? It's rare for me to praise you once. Do you have to be so sensitive? I had been locked up for an entire day, with not a drop of water to drink. I sat down at the table and served myself a bowl of bird's nest soup. The eunuch beside me hurriedly reminded me of the rules, but Yunhan dismissed him. I took a couple of sips of bird's nest soup and started helping myself to the dishes. I wasn't satisfied with what was in my own bowl. I even wanted to snatch the food from his chopsticks. I slowly swallowed the food filling my mouth and looked up to glare at him. Since I'm going to die anyway, I'm going to die with a full stomach. Yunhan curled his lips slightly. You already look pretty full now. Not enough. I had 2 more bowls of rice. Yunhan didn't take a single bite, just rested his head on his hand and watched me for a moment. I even suspected he had poisoned the food, but after thinking about it, I knew it too. I wasn't that lucky. That pervert, Yunhan, would never take my life so easily. I thought you would ask me about the whereabouts of my Yunchen. What's there to ask? In any case, you won't kill him, and now that I'm in your hands, even if I did know, I wouldn't be able to do anything. How do you know that I won't kill him? You should have been the one to force the late emperor to change his edict on his deathbed. If you killed the former crown prince right after ascending the throne and offended General Shun, wouldn't that make you crazy? I poured myself a glass of wine and took a sip. Besides, since ancient times, how many emperors have had a long life? If he doesn't become emperor and can grow up safely, that's fine too. Yunhan's eyes darkened. I came to my senses and smiled at him. Your Majesty, of course you will not die young. You will surely be blessed as vast as the Eastern Sea and live as long as Mount Tai, remaining in harmony with heaven and earth. Song Chuling, he said coldly, I'm a human, not a turtle. I so wished Yunhan were the turtle in that wishing pool. If I tossed in a copper coin, he'd spare my sorry life. 8. Yunhan said that I had to please him if I wanted to live for a full month. He summoned me to serve him in bed every night. I grew more haggard by the day, while he became more vigorous with each passing day. I understand now. He just wants to slowly torment me and make me the thorn in the side of the entire harem. It won't be long before the whole harem starts plotting against me. One day, I'll die with no place to be buried." Xie Yunhan was reviewing memorials at his desk, while I ground the ink until my hand ached. "Your Majesty, the harem must not interfere in political affairs. How about having a eunuch grind the ink for you instead?" He let out a cold laugh. "Unless I kill you, where in this world would there still be any secrets? A tyrant always threatening to kill people at the slightest provocation." Still, Xie Yunhan was indeed also someone reborn. Many of the seeds of rebellion from his previous life had already been dealt with by him over the past more than 2 years. He had gradually dismantled the power in Liu Xiong's hands, and Liu Xiong's daughter had also been schemed by him into not marrying Xie Yunbi. Xie Yunbi no longer had Liu Xiong as his backing. He was now just a toothless tiger. After Xie Yunhan finished dealing with the memorials, he still pinned me down on the couch and messed around with me for an hour. His cool lips kissed from the side of my face down to my neck, his sharp teeth lightly and then forcefully biting the tender flesh at the side of my neck. If the palace attendant bringing the late-night snack hadn't come, I think I would have been bitten to death by him. I hurriedly straightened my clothes and stood up. Just as I was about to take the food box from the palace maid's hands, she suddenly set it down and fell to her knees with a thud. "Your Majesty, the WN concubine beside you is not Jiang Tongpan's daughter Jiang Wanning at all. She is my half-sister, Song Chuling. Song Chuling has impersonated someone else to enter the palace, which is a capital offense." I looked at the indignant face of Song Lianyue, my brow knitting slightly. I had no idea who was trying to set me up, but they had released her from the cold palace and arranged for her to run to Xie Yunhan to complain. Xie Yunhan took a light sip of tea, as if he was not at all surprised by Song Lianyue's sudden appearance. "That means she truly committed a capital offense and should be executed by 1,000 cuts." I picked up the food box and fished out a piece of Osman Thus cake. Taking a bite, Song Lianyue looked at me in astonishment. "How can you eat the emperor's food?" I picked up another chestnut cake and took a bite, then smiled at her. "Shouldn't someone like me, who has committed a capital crime, be used to test poison?" Xie Yunhan looked at the memorial in his hands and said with lowered eyes, "Eat less at night. You've gained some weight recently." I ignored him and stuffed another almond milk cake into my mouth. "Today's pastries seem better than before," Xie Yunhan said. "A new imperial chef who specializes in desserts has recently joined the imperial kitchen. If you like them, I'll have him make more tomorrow." Song Lianyue seemed a little stunned after hearing what we said. After a moment of dazed silence, she slammed her forehead against the ground and trembled all over as she said, "Your Majesty, Song Chuling is nothing but a venomous woman. She drove Madame Su crazy, angered her own father to death, and even framed this concubine's innocence. Please, Your Majesty, uphold justice for this concubine." Xie Yunhan raised an eyebrow and looked at me. "Song Chuling, I never expected you to be so vicious. A death by lingering slicing would be letting you off easy. I shall execute your entire clan." Song Lianyue glared at me viciously, her expression shifting from smug to panicked. "Your Majesty, did you say, execute 9 generations of my family?" Xie Yunhan cast her a cold sideways glance. "You just told me a moment ago that you are her legitimate elder sister, didn't you?" Song Lianyue's face instantly turned as pale as paper, and her whole body trembled like a sieve. At last, unable to hold on any longer, she fell backward and fainted. "So this is what it means to be truly scared unconscious." 9. I hadn't expected Xie Yunhan to let me see Xie Yunchen again. Just as in my previous life, after the empress passed away, he was plagued by nightmares and cried through the night. During the day, he refused to eat or drink, and no one could comfort him. I sat by his bedside without saying a word, instead slowly weaving a butterfly out of rush grass and holding it out to him. He reached out to take it, and I pointed to the soup beside me. "Drink a sip of soup, and I'll give it to you to play with." Sure enough, he stopped crying and fussing, took a sip of soup, and the nanny attending in the room finally let out a sigh of relief. I handed the butterfly to him, then said, "If you drink 2 more sips, whatever you want, I'll weave it for you." Xie Yuncheng thought for a moment. "I want a big tiger, that's too hard." You have to drink at least 5 mouthfuls. Xie Yuchen only drank 3 mouthfuls of the soup, and then I did my best to make up a monstrosity for him. He rarely smiled and said many things to me. I patted his head. Your Highness, I, like you, lost my mother when I was 5. At first, I cried night after night and thought about my mother every day, but later I thought that my mother surely wouldn't want to see me like this. She would want to see me eat well, sleep well, and live well. Xie Yuchen nodded sensibly. Sister, I understand. Mother Empress would also definitely want to see me doing well. I told him a few more stories, and he finally fell asleep. The nanny said that, in his sleep, he rarely cried or fussed. By the time I returned to my bedchamber, it was already very late. The room had no lights on, and when I pushed the door open and went in, I caught a glimpse of a figure sitting at the table. I was startled, but after seeing the face of that person, I suppressed the urge to scream. I walked over and lit the lamp in the room, and the surroundings brightened. Your Majesty, are you reminiscing about the days when you were a ghost in your past life? He lifted his eyelids and gave me a cold glance. I thought you were still pining for your husband from your previous life, and that tonight you'd be sleeping at Xie Yunchen's place. If I were 2 years older, I'd already have a child as old as Xie Yunchen. How could I possibly think of him as my husband? I found it amusing. Your Majesty, are you jealous? The air fell silent for a moment. Xie Yunhan looked at me for a while before speaking abruptly. In your past life, you were so good to him. For his sake, you could use me by any means necessary, and even to save him, you didn't care about your own life. Memories of my past life surged into my mind. I closed my eyes. He always called me older sister in private. My mother was pregnant before she died. If she hadn't been framed by the legitimate wife, I might have had a younger brother or sister. Perhaps I really did treat him like my own brother. In my previous life, I did so much just so he could grow up. If he could have grown up, maybe he wouldn't have had to be a puppet. I was the one who wronged you in my past life. Do with me as you please. Xie Yunhan suddenly seized my wrist, his grip gradually loosening. He looked at me through the flickering candlelight. The arrow you took for me, I have remembered it for 2 lifetimes. I glanced at the bamboo basket on the table and sighed. If I'd known His Majesty wouldn't kill me, I wouldn't have folded myself so many gold ingots. Xie Yun gave a cold snort. That's because your mother's memorial day is coming soon, and you folded them for her. I frowned. How does your Majesty know everything? He put his arm around my waist and pulled me down onto the bed with him. I was afraid of being deceived. So I investigated your background thoroughly. I braced my arms against his chest and asked him, then does your Majesty think I'm pitiful? He stroked my hair and let out a sigh. Pitiful and hateful. 10. With Xie Yunhan as emperor in this life, the realm became much more stable. Unlike in my previous life, I no longer had to scheme all day just to survive. My days were carefree. I made a few skewers of tang hulu and sent them to Xie Yunchen. He squinted as the hawthorn made him grimace with sourness, and his face took on much of the innocence of a child. His Majesty has already infeft me as the Prince of Chen, and next month I'll be able to move out of the palace and set up my own residence. Nanny says that by then I'll have to begin my schooling, and I'll be reading all day long. He licked the sugar crumbs from the corner of his mouth. Royal sister-in-law, will you come see me? I froze for a moment. What did you call me? Xie Yunchen's voice was young and earnest. My royal brother said I can't call you sister anymore. I asked him what I should call you, and he said I should call you royal sister-in-law. On the way back to the palace, my thoughts were in turmoil, my head muddled and heavy, like a tangled knot I could not sort out. I dismissed the maids who had accompanied me and sat by the lakeside for a long while. When I turned around, I ran straight into a pair of sinister eyes. You're the woman fourth brother dotes on most. Xie Yunbi looked at me and smiled viciously. Tell me, if I played with you, would fourth brother go crazy? I curled my lip. What, you can't beat him in the court, so you can only take it out on women. Just like in my previous life, he was easily provoked by me. Xie Yunbi's expression twisted. He reached out and tried to grab my throat. I tore open the sachet at my waist and threw the powder inside into his face. In the instant he was stunned, I pulled the gold hairpin from my hair and stabbed hard at the side of his neck. Blood spurted out at once, then ran down along the veins in my palm. Hua-chun, Sangha, Lichuan, Xiulan, Qingshu, Huairou, Zhutsue, Wei Yu. He stared at me with eyes wide open, his mouth agape, unable to utter a single word. He didn't ask, but I whispered to him, in our past lives, they were all women in the harem whom you violated and killed. There were many others, and I didn't even know their names. What I regretted most was that in my previous life, that hairpin only took his eyes and not his life this time. I watched him die with my own eyes, in my hands. In this life, it was finally not lived in vain. I was brought to the front of the grand hall and made to kneel before Xie Yunhan. Beside him, his trusted old minister, Grand Secretary Ji, could not stop muttering, "Your Majesty, Consort Wan's attempt to assassinate the prince is a crime punishable by execution of the entire clan." Xie Yunhan seemed not to notice my blood-stained clothes. Frowning, he said, "Consort Wn has always been gentle and weak. I do not believe she would do such a thing." Old Minister Ji's bony old frame thudded to the ground as he knelt. "There is no respectable woman in this world who could kill so ruthlessly. For your Majesty's safety, you must not keep such a vicious woman at your side." Xie Yunhan furrowed his brow in feigned distress. "She is pregnant." As soon as those words came out, even I was stunned. When did I become pregnant? How did I not know? It was only when Xie Yunhan shot me a fierce glare that I realized he was telling me to play along. I immediately clutched my chest and pretended to be about to vomit. I understood the signal Xie Yunhan was giving me. He was telling me to make it up myself. He couldn't keep improvising. After thinking for a moment, I said softly, "This concubine has learned a few first aid methods. When I passed by the lakeside, I saw Prince Bai wounded and lying on the ground. I didn't think too much of it and rushed over to help him press on the wound to stop the bleeding, and the powder on Prince Bai's face. There's some white medicine in the face powder. I thought it might help stop the bleeding." I looked meek and obedient, and Grand Secretary Ji was fooled by my words. Blinking in confusion, Xie Yunhan walked over and helped me up from the ground. "Consort Wn is truly kind-hearted, Elder Ji. What do you think of me making her empress?" As soon as he said that, both Grand Secretary Ji and I were stunned. At this moment, a palace guard rushed in to report, "Your Majesty, the murder weapon used to assassinate Prince Bai has been found. It was the golden hairpin on Consort Wan's head. I have already confirmed that Her Ladyship Consort Wn did not notice the hairpin falling off, and it was picked up by the assassin and used to assassinate Prince Bai, then used to frame Consort Wn." I clutched my chest and said in shock, "What a vicious scheme this person has. Have you caught the assassin?" "We have." The assassin slipped into the group of palace ladies selected for the imperial selection a year ago. She is called Song Lianyue. When I heard Song Lianyue's name, I almost couldn't help laughing out loud. I had thought of finding an opportunity to frame her, but I never expected to pin such a serious charge on her. It was said that before Song Lianyue took her last breath, she confessed that she had been sent by Prime Minister Liu. Xie Yunhan also used this incident to force Prime Minister Liu into retirement and send him back to his hometown. In this life, it is not like the previous one. When the world was in turmoil and chaos, the realm is peaceful, and the people live and work in contentment. It seems that Xie Yunhan really is cut out to be an emperor. 11 at night. Xie Yunhan's fingertips brushed aside the strands of hair at my forehead, damp with sweat. My eyelashes trembled slightly, and I asked him, "After I died, did you become emperor in your previous life?" "I don't know who ultimately became emperor later on," Xie Yunhan said. "Prime Minister Liu colluded with foreign enemies and launched a massive invasion of the lands of Dayan. I died on the battlefield." Remembering the shattered state of the realm in my previous life, I suddenly felt a little sad. For Prime Minister Liu to be able to retire and return home in this life, it's really letting him off too easily. Xie Yunhan's cool, jade-like fingertips twined through my black hair as he said faintly, "I arranged for men to wait for him on the road back to his hometown long ago. I thought you didn't really kill people much anymore in this life. To be emperor, one must appear wise and benevolent, so on the surface, I don't kill people much anymore." He looked at me in the moonlight and smiled. "By the way, an emperor also can't lie. So you must bear me a child." A layer of red spread to the corners of his eyes as he pulled me into his arms. Before I could react, I was pulled by him once again into that dark tide of heat. I slept very soundly that night. I dreamed of the first time I saw Xie Yunhan in this life. He was still a prince with neither power nor influence, and in order to evade pursuit, he could only hide among the refugees fleeing the disaster. He was sitting on the ground in ragged clothes, and I, wearing a light blue ruchuan, looked down at him. Xiao Hong tugged at my sleeve. "Don't go over there, miss. His eyes are all red, it's creepy." In my previous life, Xie Yunhan had always been in a high position. I had to spare no effort to curry favor with him just to make him keep me alive. I never expected to see him so lowly before me. A sly smile curled at the corners of my lips as I handed him the white flour cake in my hand. He took a bite, still looking at me with red-rimmed eyes. I raised my hand and slapped him. "Did you say thank you?" He lowered his gaze slightly and said softly, "Thank you." When I turned to leave, I glanced back at him and seemed to catch a glint of moisture at the corner of his eye. At the time, I thought he had been brought to tears by that slap of mine, and I couldn't help feeling even more satisfied inside now that I think about it. Xie Yunhan went to the battlefield at 14 and never shed a tear. No matter how badly he was injured, how could he have been brought to tears by a single slap from me? I slowly opened my eyes and softly murmured his name, Xie Yunhan. I didn't know whether Xie Yunhan was asleep or awake, but the hand resting at my waist tightened slightly. "When you first saw me in this life, did you cry?" The faint candlelight fell across his deep, refined brows and eyes. I lay on his chest and stared at him for a long while. Xie Yunhan held me tightly and kissed the top of my head, giving a soft hum. He opened his sleepy eyes and met my dazed gaze, then suddenly let out a laugh. "Ling, in our previous life, you were the one who provoked me. Now that you've fallen into my hands in this life, you'd better accept your fate." I also never expected that I would be entangled with Xie Yunhan for 2 lifetimes. This morning, Xie Yunhan had already issued an edict naming me empress. I had no maternal family or backing, so he made me acknowledge General Shen as my adoptive father. I did not need to scheme. He had already arranged everything for me. Aside from my mother, no one in this world had ever planned anything for my sake. To end up in his hands again in this life doesn't seem like a loss at all. I never imagined that Xie Yunhan and I, 2 such cold and indifferent people, would end up together in this life. With reddened eyes, I looked at him and said, "If I'd known, I would have taken a few more arrows for you. No, in this life, you have to die after me. This time, I can't be the only one left alive in this world." He looked at me through the stillness of the night, the cold in his dark eyes gradually melting away. He reached out to tuck the blanket around me, then sighed helplessly. "Go to sleep, Empress. Tomorrow there's still the enthronement ceremony." I leaned against his chest and slowly closed my eyes. The winter night was very quiet. One could hear the charcoal burning in the brazier and the sound of snow outside snapping branches under its weight. The stars twinkled in the night sky. Tomorrow would surely be a sunny day. After hearing the first story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Next, there is another similar story. Let's continue to see. I have been in the palace for 10 years, yet I remain a low-ranking consort without favor, unable to compete for favor or raise my own child by my side. I had no choice but to follow the crowd and align myself with the powerful to ensure my survival. When the imperial consort was deposed and exiled, and everyone trampled on her, I was also forced to bully her 3rd prince. But in this palace, I have always been the one bullied by others. I never learned how to bully anyone myself. I scratched my head and had no choice but to give the jujube flour cake I had made myself to the 3rd prince. "You only deserve to eat this low-class pastry." The 9-year-old 3rd prince clutched that piece of jujube flour cake, standing quietly in the shade of the tree. His pitch-black eyes stared straight at me for a long time, as if seeing through my blustering, hollow nature. Bullying the 3rd prince was the right thing to do, because that very night, the emperor summoned me to his chambers. Having not received the emperor's favor for half a year, I was both startled and overjoyed. Hastily tidying up the dusty dressing table, when Pei Rong arrived in the evening, he didn't glance at the carefully polished pearl hairpins, paid no mind to my worn silk skirt with its frayed seams, and didn't even notice the handkerchief I was twisting nearly to shreds in my hands. He wearily closed the book and rubbed his temples. The emperor, who rarely showed his emotions, gave me an uncharacteristically gentle smile. You have been in the palace for all these years, never striving for favor. Always gentle and well-behaved, that is commendable. I ask you, would you like to raise a child? My heart leaped with joy, and I nearly lost my grip on the teacup in my hand. Is my Yua coming back? Pei Rong set down the book, not pressing the matter of my presumptuous words, and only said in a low voice, nonsense. Yua is the Empress's child. Besides, Yua does not wish to be close to you. Do not speak such words again in the future. As he spoke, snow fell softly outside, and the crackle of the lamp wick only made the room seem even more silent. For the sake of this snow, Pei Rong was also willing to soften her expression. I remember the year you entered the palace. The snow was just as heavy. 10 years ago, when I entered the palace, everyone envied my good fortune and luck. The emperor favored the noble consort exclusively, and the newly selected beauties from a few days ago were all dismissed, until the last day. His Majesty and the imperial consort had a quarrel and were in a bad mood. He casually pointed to me, who came from an ordinary family and was not particularly outstanding in appearance, and I became pregnant after my first night with him. Giving birth to Yua, my good fortune ended right there. People in the palace all said that Yua was not like the dull and reticent Lady Wen. He was very clever, so clever that his tutor praised him, and Pei Rong was overjoyed, too clever to want to get close to me, or even acknowledge me. 2 years ago, when Yua was sent to the cunning palace to be raised, I knelt on the ground, holding Yua and shedding tears, fearing that each glance at him would be one less in the future. But the 6-year-old Yua pushed me away with a look of confusion in his eyes. Third brother's mother is consort Ju. You are just a noble lady, and you are not worthy of being my mother. When Yua said this, my heart also grew cold and sorrowful. But what mother in the world would hold a grudge against her own child? I will find a way to rise in rank, but rising in rank is difficult. The concubines in the harem compete for attention like flowers in the imperial garden, and the empress holds shears, watching over the restless branches. I am not as skilled in singing and dancing as consort Ju, nor do I have the outstanding family background of Her Majesty the Empress. If I had to name one advantage, it would be that I take after my mother in being able to make a good pot of soup, but the palace has its own kitchens, and if Pei Rong stays up late reviewing memorials, the soups and dishes sent from the small kitchens of the various consorts pile up so high that there's no room left for the memorials. When I truly miss Yua, I save up my monthly allowance and, along with the jujube flour cakes I make myself, ingratiatingly slip them to Eunuch Chio, who takes care of Yua. Eunuch Chio was a smooth and sophisticated man of propriety. With a beaming smile, he accepted the silver and politely declined the jujube flour cakes. Yua also always avoided me. I spent a lot of silver, but I didn't get to see her many times. Later, Yua suddenly fell ill, and it was said that the flesh and blood of her birth mother were needed as medicine. I never expected Yua to acknowledge me. I only wanted him to recover, but when Yua heard that my blood was used in the medicine, he knocked it to the ground, refusing to take it even if it meant death. How disgusting. Yua has only one mother, the Empress. What are you to me? When I knelt at the palace gate to plead for forgiveness, the Empress held Yua, who had cried himself to sleep, in her arms, not even lifting her head. Over the years, you've sent quite a few clothes and food for the 4th prince. I pitied you and chose not to make an issue of it. When Tang, by rank, you are merely a noble lady. If you truly care for the 4th prince, you should not see him again. As she spoke, Yua woke up, whining and fussing, demanding that the Empress dock my monthly allowance for half a year to teach me a lesson. I didn't dare to talk back anymore, just lowered my head and hummed in agreement. Indeed, what higher rank is there than that of the Empress? I gradually gave up the idea of taking Yua back. When I came to my senses, Pei Rong smiled gently, but left no room for refusal. When Tang, I ask you, do you wish to raise the 3rd prince? Younger, no, definitely not. Noble lady, think carefully. In this palace, what good thing isn't fought over? How could a perfectly fine prince just be handed over to you to raise for nothing? Yua's wet nurse, Nanny Chen, is from my hometown, She doesn't have the palace habit of flattering the powerful and looking down on the lowly. She acts and speaks with a kind heart. When I first entered the palace and became pregnant with Yua, it was Mother Chen who took care of me, watching over my diet at every turn, ensuring I safely gave birth to Yua. She kept shaking her head and sighing, rambling on about how difficult it is to raise a child who has already recognized a mother, and how hard it is for stepmothers in their village. Imperial consort has fallen out of favor, and His Majesty feels displeased when he sees the third prince. Moreover, Imperial consort and the Empress are at odds. How could the Empress possibly treat Imperial consort's child well? Raising the third prince is truly a thankless task for a noble lady. Not only does it fail to win the Empress' favor, but it also invites the suspicion of the Empress. Why go through such trouble? You might as well focus on taking good care of yourself and, in the future, have a child of your own to rely on. I recalled yesterday, when the snow had just cleared, the third prince stood silently in the shadow of a tree, his eyes filled with envy as he watched his siblings play. His face was pale, and his clothes were thin. It was likely that after the imperial consort was deposed, the servants and maids assigned to look after him were no longer attentive. Yua saw him and, with a mischievous grin, quickly formed a snowball and unexpectedly threw it at Yanga's face. "Oh, it's third brother. I thought it was some careless little eunuch." The snowball was deliberately packed with a sharp stone, causing Yanga's head to bleed. Yanga's disheveled and helpless appearance, not daring to fight back, made the brothers burst into laughter. I instinctively wanted to scold Yua for her rudeness, but was met with a faint glance from Eunuch Cho standing beside her. "The fourth prince is under the guidance of Her Majesty the Empress, so it would be best for you, noble lady, not to interfere. However, this servant must remind noble lady when circumstances are stronger than individuals. Would you dare to defy the Emperor's will?" Yua gave me a rather smug look. It has been over half a year since the imperial consort was demoted to a commoner and expelled from the palace, and Pei Rong has yet to find a suitable mother for the third prince. Yanga the Empress is wary, the Emperor is indifferent, and Pei Yang is left to be bullied in this imperial harem. One cannot survive on conscience alone. What matters more is self-preservation. Besides, only by staying alive can I watch Yua grow up. Almost instinctively, I shoved the jujube flour cake I had prepared for Yua into Yanga's hands, hurriedly recalling the words others had mocked me with when I had fallen out of favor before. "You lowly scum, you only deserve to eat this pig slop." But I was too guilty, and ended up insulting my own craftsmanship. You only deserve to eat this low-class pastry." Yanga held the warm jujube flour cake, quietly and silently watching me for a long, long time, so long that it seemed as if she had seen through my blustering malice. I didn't even dare to look into the child's eyes, grabbing the food box and fleeing in panic. But after all, that child Yanga is just too pitiful. It's the coldest days of winter, and with the snow melting outside, it's even colder. That child is still dressed so thinly. I really couldn't bear it in my heart, thinking of the winter clothes I had made, which Yua had refused to wear, finding them too shabby. "Nanny, if I secretly give those clothes to Yanga without anyone noticing, would that be all right?" Nanny Chen glanced at me. This aunt, who had long resided in the palace, having witnessed court intrigues and countless storms, suddenly sighed. "Your ladyship has a kind heart, but this servant does not know whether such kindness in the palace is a blessing or a curse." Before I could think further, an imperial decree was announced outside. Pei Rong praised my virtue and placed the third prince, Pei Yang, under my name. When the eunuch delivering the decree arrived with Pei Yang through the snow, the wound on Pei Yang's head had not yet healed. He knelt outside the Caisang Palace and earnestly kowtowed to me amid the swirling snow. This 9-year-old child knelt upright, having witnessed the fickleness of the palace and the tendency to fawn on the powerful and trample on the weak over the past 6 months. He looked up with a smile that was both ingratiating and numb. "Mother, Yanga knows how to help you win back favor and bring back fourth brother. Mother, you will see that Yanga is useful." The imperial decree had been issued. Nanny Chen shook her head and quietly murmured a prayer for Buddha's protection. I hurriedly helped Yanga up, then called for the palace maids to add more charcoal to the fire and bring some clothes. The entire mulberry palace was warm and cozy. I gestured at the winter clothes I had made for Yua, which actually didn't fit Yanga very well. The sleeves were a bit short. Pei Yang quickly tugged at his sleeves and kept saying, "It fits perfectly. Yanga really likes it, thank you, mother." While applying medicine to Pei Yang, I felt a pang of guilt in my heart. It's my fault for not teaching that child well. Hearing me mention Yua, Pei Yang quietly clenched his fist, then looked up with a flattering smile. Little brother just wanted to play with me, he didn't mean any harm. Besides, I'm not seriously hurt, it's nothing. Although Pei Yang kept calling me mother consort, it somehow made me feel strangely distant. If you're not used to it, you can call me consort when in the Mulberry Palace, but outside, you must address me as mother consort. Pei Yang tightly grabbed the hem of my clothes, shaking his head desperately, afraid that I might abandon him. "No, from now on, you are Yanga's mother consort." As I watched over Yanga until he fell into a deep sleep, he remained frowning and still refused to let go of my sleeve. I put down the winter clothes I was altering, smoothed the damp hair at his temples, and for some reason, felt a pang of sadness for this precocious child. Back when the imperial consort was at the height of her favor, every time Pei Yang fell ill, the emperor and the consort would stay by his side day and night, but now, he doesn't even have a warm winter coat. Just now, when he smiled at me so ingratiatingly, it seemed for no reason, as if he were crying before leaving. Mama Chen sighed quietly. "Your grace is kind-hearted, but please don't be foolish. You must still have your own child." The sky darkened, and the cold wind howled outside. When I finished trimming the sleeves and looked up, I realized that Pei Yang had already woken up. The palace attendant brought the porridge that had been kept warm on the stove, along with the side dishes and flatbread I had made myself. Watching Pei Yang devour the food and finish every last bite, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Although the provisions in Saisang Palace may not be as abundant as in other palaces, the food here should be the best, since you can't eat foods that might aggravate your wound while it's healing. Once Yanga is fully recovered, I'll let you taste your mother's cooking. Pei Yang put down his rice bowl and looked at me seriously. "Mother, I have seen the noble consort favored by His Majesty, so I can help you become a favored consort." I just smiled at his words and didn't take them seriously. The women in the harem would go to any lengths to win favor, from poetry and literature to horsemanship and sword dancing. Emperor Pei Rong had no shortage of beautiful consorts. In my 10 years in the palace, I couldn't think of a way to win favor. How could a 9-year-old child possibly come up with one? Pei Yang shook his head with certainty. "I know there is one thing that none of them have, only my mother has." I didn't know what unique qualities I possessed, otherwise I wouldn't have spent 10 years in the palace without gaining the emperor's favor. It wasn't until the third night that Pei Rong sent an edict saying he would come to my Taixiang palace. I hurriedly rummaged through a few old dresses and outdated jewelry, hastily dressing myself up. Although the fabric patterns were old and the pearl hairpins had lost their luster, this was the best set I had kept. However, Yanga shook his head, saying this wasn't good, and he had another idea. A light touch of makeup, simple colored sleepwear, hair loosely tied, adorned with nothing. Yanga obediently rests on my lap, looking up and pointing at the book to ask me about the characters. A pot of sweet red bean soup is warming on the small stove, with the gentle glow of candlelight filling the room. The warm, sweet aroma of orange peel and red beans by the stove feels as cozy as an ordinary, reunited family. "Mother, look how heavily it's snowing outside." Following Pei Yang's gesture, I turned my head with an absent-minded smile, only to see His Majesty standing outside the window, his shoulders dusted with snow, watching me for who knows how long, perhaps to avoid disturbing this moment of peace. Even as the wind and snow howled, Pei Rong had forbidden the attending eunuchs from announcing his arrival. Meeting my smiling eyes as I turned, the emperor, who was accustomed to beauty and schemes, was left stunned for a long moment. I bowed with trepidation, and as I rose, I intended to brush the snow from Pei Rong's shoulder, only to find that most of it had already melted. But Pei Rong paid it no mind. He noticed the thick new clothes Yanga had patched halfway, observed the medicated wound on his temple, and finally, His gaze settled on the sweet red bean soup warming on the stove. Having been away from the imperial presence for so long, Yang was more adept at reading expressions than I was. He had already ladled a bowl of the sweet soup and respectfully presented it. This was made by my mother. Father, please try it. A bowl of warm sweet soup in winter soothes the stomach and comforts the heart. Pei Rong's gaze at me also carried a faint hint of approval. You have taken great care of Yang. I did not misjudge you. The next day, the weather cleared, and the bright sun, mingled with the snowlight from the eaves, dazzled the eyes. When I knelt to receive the imperial decree appointing me as a consort, it felt like a dream. In addition to Pei Rong's rewards, the imperial household department also specially sent a generous supply of fruits, vegetables, winter delicacies, dried meats, and 2 pheasants with brilliantly colored tail feathers. It was then that I realized even the servants from the imperial household department, who always wore stern expressions, could smile. The continuous stream of rewards from the Mulberry Palace attracted some concubines to come and visit, and even the princes like Yua, who had just finished their studies, came to see the excitement. I grabbed a handful of longans and hurriedly tried to stuff them into Yua's hands, but Yua refused to take them. He glanced at the lambs and pheasants, then saw the silks and jewels, and turned his head away disdainfully. Is that all? It's not even as good as what's in my mother's palace. What's so special about a pheasant? My uncle won a battle, and my grandfather even said he'd bring back 2 ponies for me. The princes and princesses knew that Yua was the empress's child and that her brother had achieved great military feats. So they quickly nodded in agreement. My hand, holding the longan, awkwardly froze in midair. Yang tugged at my sleeve and thoughtfully took the longan from my hand. Mother, Yang will eat. As Yang reached out his hand, Yua caught sight of his half-patched sleeve and laughed. Third brother, you have no shame. You eat the food I won't eat, wear the clothes I won't wear, and even call the mother I won't call my own. The brothers and sisters burst into laughter and ran off, leaving Yang speechless. I wanted to scold Yua and make him apologize to Yang. Yua made a face and ran off in a flash. Yang shook his head, so sensible it made my heart ache. Yang doesn't like wearing new clothes. This one is just fine. What child doesn't like new clothes? I instructed the palace maids to carefully store those pieces of jewelry and record each one in the ledger. Yang observed my expression and cautiously asked me, why doesn't mother consort try on those silks and jewelry? Is it because you don't like them, or do you think there are too few? Mother, don't be unhappy. Yang will help you win even more. Happy? How could I not be happy? Just these fine silks alone are enough to make Yang some new clothes, so he doesn't have to wear US hand-me-downs anymore. I happily took Yang's hand and held the silks up against him one by one to compare. I'll work on it these next few days, and Yang will have new clothes to wear before the festival. Yang held the bolts of satin in a daze, her eyes full of confusion, even her words stumbling. These are all for making clothes for me. Of course not. Yang lowered her eyes in understanding, smiling self-deprecatingly. Of course, it's not just about making clothes. We also need to make knee pads and book bags. Let me think carefully if there's anything else I've missed. Oh, right. And that lamb meat, I need to think carefully about how to prepare it. Yang is too thin. She needs to nourish herself well. During the winter, just now, when I measured his figure, I realized how frighteningly thin he is. Yang stared at me in astonishment, as if unable to believe that someone would genuinely consider these trivial matters for him. He carefully touched the silk in his arms, and only then did he show a hint of a child's clumsiness. I crouched down and patted his head, feeling a bit embarrassed by my own lack of ambition. Mother doesn't dislike those pieces of jewelry, she just can't bear to wear them. It's just that your mother is thinking that she has no real skills. If in the future she falls out of favor, and you, like Yua, are no longer by her side, she can still use her jewelry to bribe someone to go and see you. Yang stared at me for a long, long time, then very seriously made a promise. Yang is very clever. He won't let mother fall out of favor, and he won't abandon mother either. I didn't use the equally clever Yua to argue with him, nor did I want to tell him about how easily people's hearts change in the palace and how one can be forced into situations beyond their control. I just patted his head, affirming the sincerity of a child. Mother believes in Yang. That night, Pei Rong chose my name card and was about to rest in my palace. Eunuch Chiu from the Cunning Palace hurried over to deliver a message. Your Majesty, the Empress has had a recurrence of her old illness. Please go and see her. When Pei Rong left, the snow outside had already stopped, and the world was clear and bright. I picked up the half-finished clothes for Yang and continued to work on them. After Pei Rong left, Yang stood nervously in the corner, observing my expression. Mother, don't be angry, Yang will win father back. I placed the orange warmed by the fireside into Yang's hands to warm them, smiling as I said, Mother is not angry. Go to sleep now. Now that His Majesty has left, there's one less person to compete with me for the late-night snack. After all, he's just a child, easily distracted by the mention of food. Yang pulled the quilt over her head and whispered coquettishly, Then, Mother, tomorrow I want to eat scallion braised lamb. Okay, alright. At noon the next day, I stir-fried a plate of scallion braised lamb and made flatbread with beef fat. The flatbread was fried until crispy and golden on both sides, and I placed a bowl of lamb bone soup in front of Yang. Yang frowned slightly, glanced at me again, as if having made up her mind, and drank the soup sip by sip. In the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, Yang suddenly began vomiting and having diarrhea, and even started breaking out in rashes all over her body. Yang lay weakly on the bed but smiled at me, seeking praise. Mother, I am sick now, you can go and invite father to come. What use is it to invite Pei Rong? He's not a royal physician. Just as I was burning with anxiety, Eunuch Chiu was already waiting outside the Mulberry Palace, smiling as he conveyed the Empress's concern. The third prince is seriously ill. Why not wait until His Majesty finishes court, and her ladyship will help you pass the message, asking His Majesty to come to the Mulberry Palace later to check on him. I have to take care of the sick Yang. How could I possibly have time to groom myself and attend to His Majesty? I politely replied to Eunuch Chiu, Thank you for Her Majesty's kindness, but I need to take care of Yang, so there's no need to disturb His Majesty. Upon hearing my refusal, Eunuch Chiu's smile froze on his face, and he left in disappointment. The imperial physician prescribed 2 doses of medicinal soup, but by evening, there was still no improvement for some reason. I always feel like Yang is hiding something from me. I quickly sent someone to fetch Nanny Chen. Nanny Chen, who was experienced in caring for children, first inquired about Yang's diet and then asked if he had caught a cold. After ruling out all possibilities one by one, Nanny Chen also found Yang's illness to be quite puzzling. Why doesn't mother send someone to invite father? Yang lay in bed, looking at me uneasily. Is it because I'm not sick enough? Upon hearing this, Nanny Chen's expression changed. She quietly pulled me aside and lowered her voice. Do you know why the imperial consort was deposed? I had heard some rumors about the imperial consort falling out of favor. It is said that the imperial consort used aphrodisiacs to maintain the emperor's favor, but this also harmed the emperor's ability to have many heirs. It is said that the imperial consort used the princes to vie for favor, mistreated Yang, and sought the emperor's pity. Upon hearing that the empress was going to help me invite Pei Rong, Matron Chen was filled with lingering fear and kept chanting prayers. Noble lady, the rumors you've heard are all true. Amitabha, if you had just gone to invite His Majesty, I'm afraid in His Majesty's eyes, you would be just like the noble consort, both harboring malicious intentions to use children to vie for favor. I only felt a chill running down my spine seeing my fear. Yang looked at me with confusion in his eyes. Why is mother not happy that I'm sick? In the past, whenever he fell ill, the noble consort would be pleased, recalling how terrified Yang was trembling after Pei Rong left yesterday. Perhaps if Pei Rong couldn't stay, Yang would face the noble consort's beatings. My heart ached, and I couldn't bring myself to blame him for his well-intentioned but misguided efforts. I explained the stakes clearly, tucked him in, and gently told him, because Yang is sick, mother is very worried. When Yang gets better, mother will be happy. Pei Yang lowered his eyes, trying to understand whether my happiness and the noble consort's happiness were truly the same thing. I gently placed the hot water bottle on Yang's stomach and asked him softly, Tell mother, why did Yang get sick? He laughed heartily. Yang always gets like this after eating scallions and lamb. It's nothing serious. I've had it before, Lamb isn't arsenic. At most, it'll make you uncomfortable, but it won't kill you. The lamb my mother makes is better than what the noble consort's palace used to serve. My mother treats me very well, so I was genuinely happy while eating it, really." When he said that, the old scar on my wrist from cutting flesh to cure Yua's illness also ached faintly along with my heart. Yanga's voice grew softer and softer. In the end, he fell silent. He covered his bitter sorrow and wailing sobs with the quilt. "Why do all the other siblings have mothers who dote on them so much? Why even you, consort Wen, are so kind to me? Only she doesn't like Yanga." A wave of bitterness washed over my heart. I don't know how to explain love and hate to a 9-year-old child. It's like scallions and mutton, which make Yanga feel unwell. But this isn't something Yanga can decide, so you can't blame yourself. Everything in this world has its reason, just as flowers and grass have their seasons, and fruits have their time. Love and hate are like a person's spleen and stomach, with no logic to speak of. To comfort him, and to comfort myself, Yanga cried herself to exhaustion and fell asleep in my arms. He had a nightmare, and in his dream, he whispered a very soft apology to me. Yanga has recovered from his illness, and the tutor has urged him several times to go to the study, but he has been evasive and unwilling to go. I suspect that Yua is the one leading the bullying against Yanga, forbidding the other siblings from playing with him. Children of this age all crave playmates, but last time when I brought Yua some jujube flower cakes, I saw Yanga standing alone in the shadows of the trees, watching his siblings play with envy. It was fourth brother who wanted me to kneel on the ground and bark like a dog before he would let me join in, Yanga said, pretending to be magnanimous as he waved his hand. It didn't matter before. My clothes were already dirty anyway, but these clothes were made for me by mother, who stayed up all night sewing them. I can't bear to get them dirty. The world of children can be as complex as a royal harem. I spent several days working hard, then slipped some silver to Nanny Chen, begging her to do me a favor. Nanny Chen had a sharp tongue but a soft heart. As she handed me the items, she kept grumbling at me. "For the sake of a child who came into your life halfway, is it worth putting yourself through such torment?" When Pei Rong arrived in the afternoon, she lifted the curtain to find the room filled with the sweet scent of syrup. On the bed lay half-cut clothing patterns, while on the table, a vase held pheasant tail feathers, with a few copper coins scattered nearby by the small stove. Yang Yang and I were surrounded by a circle of fluffy heads, as the princes and princesses chatted and argued. "Lady Wen, Yua wants the butterfly one. Lady Wen, I want 2 sugar paintings," holding the sugar painting. I deliberately frowned with a troubled expression. "But all these sugar paintings belong to third brother. Lady Wen can't make the decision." The clever 5th princess, Yua, immediately hugged Pei Yang's arm and gently pleaded, "Third brother, could you please help Yua beg Lady Wen for me?" With Yua as an example, a circle of younger siblings gathered around Yanga. It was the first time Yanga had been approached so closely by his siblings, and his pale face showed a hint of bewilderment. He looked at me for help. I placed the sugar painting in Yanga's hand and gave him an encouraging nod. "Yanga, there are many emotions in this world that can be obtained without sacrificing self-respect or hurting oneself. I also worry that Yanga may not be able to take this step. But people are small, and their memories are few." Yanga truly resembles his elder brother's generous demeanor, earnestly sharing the sugar painting with his younger siblings. He even gave his own portion to Yua, instructing her, "Please take this to fourth brother Yua. Yua, don't sneak a bite." Yanga turned back, eager for my praise. I could see his habitual attempt to please. "Yanga, ask yourself, do you really want to give this sugar painting to fourth brother? Or are you just afraid of upsetting mother consort?" Yanga fell silent, and after a long while, she whispered softly, "I don't want to give it, but I'm afraid of upsetting mother consort." I took the sugar painting that Yua was holding for Yua and returned it to Yanga's hand. "Yanga, it's because you ignore your own feelings that your mother is unhappy. This is Yanga's thing. If Yanga doesn't want to give it, then she doesn't have to." Yanga nodded vigorously, biting the candy in her hand with a crisp sound. I turned my head and saw Pei Rong standing behind the screen, and hurriedly knelt down to pay my respects. Pei Rong waved off the formalities and asked with interest what we were doing. "Making shuttlecocks." drawing sugar paintings, and cutting clothes. Pei Rong examined the crooked sugar painting, which stirred some childhood memories, and smiled. You really know how to play with children. Yesterday, I heard the Empress complain a bit, saying that the princes and princesses loved to run to the Mulberry Palace. I was worried that something had happened. I was afraid that Pei Rong would think Yang was indulging in trivial pursuits and losing his ambition, and even more afraid that Pei Rong would think I was deliberately using the children to vie for favor. I hurriedly explained, it was originally made for my own amusement, but I couldn't just let the children watch with longing eyes. Seeing Pei Rong arrive, the children also became more reserved, shrinking back and not daring to laugh or talk. Pei Rong had a hint of a strict father's helplessness. It seems I have disturbed your enjoyment. At a glance from Chief Eunuch Li, who served before the emperor, the matrons from each palace led the princesses and princes back, although Yue was afraid of her father. She wanted the beautiful shuttlecock by the window even more. Then, Lady Wen, don't forget Yue's shuttlecock. The shuttlecock won't be ready until tomorrow. If third brother is feeling better tomorrow and can go to the study to read, I'll have him bring it to you. Okay. Yue eagerly tugged on Yang's sleeve. Then, third brother, you must get better quickly. Yue is waiting to play shuttlecock with you. Pei Rong saw the brightly colored shuttlecock by the window and suddenly remembered that I, too, was a young lady raised in a scholarly family. I seem to recall that your father was the prefect of Taizong. How is it that the daughter of a prefect enjoys cooking and can even make sugar paintings and shuttlecocks? After 10 years in the palace, Pei Rong showed the slightest interest in my background for the first time. What kind of girl was Wen Tang before she entered the palace? That was a long time ago. Back then, my parents' marriage was actually a big event in Taizong because my father was already a prefect, while my mother was just a small cook at Wangjiang Tower. Everyone says that my mother becoming the wife of a prefect was like a sparrow turning into a phoenix, but all these years, my father has always insisted that he was the one who married above his station. Before I turned 8, I also thought my mother was just lucky because my father wore his official robes, and everyone who came to visit him treated him with the utmost respect. Yet my mother would roll up her sleeves and argue with street vendors over shortchanging her. Later, when I was 8 years old, my father was demoted. Although my father pretended nothing was wrong and tried his best to comfort me, a child's emotions are always more sensitive than an adult's. It was my mother who pawned her hairpin, cooked a bowl of red bean sweet soup, added many honey dates, and placed 2 bowls in front of me and my father. See, we can still enjoy such sweet soup at home. How bad can life really be? I still remember the sweet taste of that bowl of red bean soup very clearly. Later, when I entered the palace, whenever I encountered something unpleasant, I would go to the kitchen and cook a bowl of sweet soup to eat. I believe my mother was right. Life wouldn't stay this bad forever. As for the sugar painting and shuttlecock, those were also taught to me by my mother. My father's official career was not smooth, and he moved around to many places. I would always just make friends, only to part ways again, but I was always able to make friends quickly. At first, I thought it was because people were warm-hearted and I was lucky. Later, I found out that it was because my mother bought a whole basket of pastries and went door to door, giving them to the children in the neighborhood, asking them to be friends with me. Later, when I injured my leg and couldn't go out to play, my mother learned to draw sugar paintings and bake plum blossom cakes. At that time, our home was even livelier than the school. I was raised in the palm of their hands until I was 14 years old. Later, by the grace of heaven, I entered the palace to participate in the selection of imperial consorts. Outside the palace gate, families instructed the young women on how to speak and act, and how to bring honor to their families. My mother only tightened my collar, fearing the wind would blow in. If you don't get chosen, don't cry. Mother has stewed duck leg and bamboo shoot soup, and fried meatballs, waiting for you to come back and eat. I nodded blankly, thinking that entering the palace was just like visiting someone's home, and I could return later in the day. I have been in the palace for 10 years, and it has been 10 years since I last saw her. Afraid that Pei Rong would detect my sadness, I quickly forced a smile. Being able to enter the palace to serve His Majesty is a great honor for our family, and my parents are both delighted for me. Pei Rong did not dwell on my sorrow. but instead sighed with emotion, "Your father and mother are truly wonderful, which is why they raised you with such a gentle nature. No wonder the children are so willing to be close to you." Pei Rong did not have many children, and most of them were taught to be well-behaved and respectful. I could see the barely noticeable disappointment on Pei Rong's face when the children were afraid of him just now. But the emperor's emotions are not something I can speculate on. Yang looked at it. Carefully picked up the sugar painting on the table to please his father, whom he both feared and respected. "Father, have something sweet too. Don't frown." Under the lamplight, Pei Rong gently took my hand and pulled me into his embrace. "Yue and Yang, your children take after you, sensible, considerate, and content. No matter what the empress says, I am at ease knowing the children are with you." The next day, Yang remembered the shuttlecock that fifth sister wanted. He put on new clothes, paid his respects in the courtyard, and then eagerly headed to the study. Pei Rong didn't let anyone disturb me. My back and waist were sore, and I slept until the sun was high in the sky. The palace maid then mentioned that Eunuch Li from His Majesty's side had sent over many things. In addition to the reward, there was also a bowl of duck leg and bamboo shoot soup along with a plate of fried meatballs. Pei Rong put thought into preparing this for me, but the taste was still different from home. While eating, Yang looked at me uneasily. "Mother, why are you crying? Is the soup not tasty?" I patted his head. "The soup is delicious. Mother just misses home. I should be considered a favored concubine at the New Year's palace banquet." I was actually able to sit at the front. The empress's brother, General Zhao, had won a great victory and entered the hall in full military attire with his sword, drawing the attention of everyone present. But Pei Rong did not mind. Instead, he smiled and drank 3 cups of wine offered by General Zhao. After 3 rounds of drinks, General Zhao intentionally or unintentionally brought up the matter of appointing a crown prince. Unlike the previous emperor, Pei Rong did not have many children, only 4 princes. General Zhao laughed heartily as he patted the head of the 4th prince. "Pei Yu, I think Yue is a fine child." Pei Rong glanced at the empress and simply dismissed the idea. "The 3rd prince is the eldest, and the 7th and 9th princes have also reached the age to begin their education." I saw the queen's eyes darken, while the mothers of the 2 princes could hardly conceal their delight. Only I instinctively felt a tightening in my heart and gripped Yang's hand tightly. Yang looked up at me and leaned gently into my arms. "Mother, don't be afraid." The days passed swiftly, and before they knew it, the Mid-Autumn Festival was upon them. Yet, there was no festive atmosphere in the palace. This was because 2 imperial consorts had died in quick succession. The birth mothers of the 7th prince and the 9th prince, one had succumbed to a sudden, severe illness, while the other had accidentally fallen into a lake overnight. The empress had 3 princes at her knee at the same time. In recognition of my many years in the palace and my contribution in giving birth to the 3rd prince, Pei Rong promoted my rank, and I became the imperial consort, second only to one person. At the funeral ceremonies of the 2 consorts, everyone's eyes secretly drifted to me and Yang. There was curiosity, pity, and schadenfreude. When the political situation of the previous dynasty cooled down like the weather, Pei Rong often came to my palace. The 3 of us were like a family of 3, sharing a bowl of very sweet red bean soup. Pei Rong held my hand, saying some words to me, and also to himself. "I know you feel wronged and afraid, just wait a little longer. In my heart, you are more like a queen who embodies the grace of a mother to the world than the Zhao family." The handling of the Zhao family, the maternal clan of the empress, took place during the Mid-Autumn Festival 2 years later. First, General Zhao, returning to his residence drunk on a rainy night, inexplicably drowned in a shallow puddle of water. With the concerns of the previous court resolved, old cases from the inner palace were easily brought to light again. Pei Rong was furious that the emperor had demoted the imperial consort to a commoner, but the empress, defying the imperial will, secretly poisoned the consort with arsenic. The crimes of harming the prince and murdering the imperial consort were all brought to light against the empress. The day before the empress was placed under house arrest, an unexpected visitor arrived at my Taixiang palace. It was Yue. He flatteringly carried the food box outside the Mulberry Palace, just as I had once stood in the snow waiting for him. "Mother, Yue wishes to return to your side. He is smarter than Yang, so smart that it frightens me. I refuse to see him, only sending a message through the palace. Maid, fourth prince, please return. With my background, I am not worthy to be your mother. Yet, feeling a pang of reluctance, she instructed the palace maid to escort him back. Yue then turned to her brother Yang, placing the food box in his hands. Third brother, please help me beg mother. Yang didn't want to put me in a difficult position, so she accepted the food box and agreed. However, the food sent by Yue was poisoned. Fortunately, arsenic tastes bitter and sour, and Yang didn't eat much, so it didn't endanger her life. Pei Rong has already handed the phoenix seal to me. Cleaning up the remnants of the Zhao clan has left him with no time to deal with the dirty affairs of the harem, so he has left it to me to handle on my own. When the decree to strip her of her title and confine her to the detached palace was announced, Pei Yu cursed in disbelief. What mother in this world doesn't love her child? How can you give birth to me and then abandon me? He is just the low-born son of a deposed consort. While I am your own flesh and blood, I used to be just like Yang, doing many foolish things to keep the one I loved most by my side. I would scrimp and save, sacrifice my own well-being, and even stand in the snow all day just to catch one more glimpse of him. That day, when Yang cried her heart out under the covers, it felt as if I were seeing myself. Yang gently wiped away my tears. Mother, don't be sad. Yang will always be by your side, forever and ever. After the new year, Pei Rong established me as the empress and entrusted me with the tasks of raising the prince and preparing for the selection of new consorts. You are more virtuous than the former Zhao clan. In the future, when new consorts bear sons, they will also be raised in your palace. Yang heard this and asked me very seriously, will father send his new children to mother to raise? Then mother won't have only Yang by her side anymore, right? I thought that since Pei Rong had said so, it must be reliable. Seeing me say this, Yang nodded. I get it now. I thought Yang was just asking casually and didn't take it to heart. But as soon as the decree for the grand selection was issued, Pei Rong gradually fell ill, and the imperial physician said it was poisoning. After investigating back and forth, the arsenic clue pointed to the deposed empress's palace, adding another charge to Lady Zhao's crimes. A country cannot be without a ruler for a day, and Yang, under my name, is the rightful crown prince. On the day Yang ascended the throne, it happened to be my birthday. He winked and told me he had prepared a grand gift for me. A carriage carried me out of the high palace walls, swaying just as it had 13 years ago when it brought me into the palace. The carriage stopped at a household, the gate wide open, and an unfamiliar maid led me out of the carriage. The furnishings in the room remained unchanged, with a steaming bowl of duck leg and bamboo shoot soup and a plate of fried meatballs on the table. I turned around abruptly to find my father and mother, whom I hadn't seen in 13 years, standing behind me with graying hair, gazing at me with affection. My mother, her eyes brimming with tears, scolded me with a smile. Where have you been fooling around? Why are you back so late? Pei Yang's side story. My mother hates me. She always says that after giving birth to me, her beauty and favor were never the same as before, so when father didn't come to see her, she took out all her resentment on me. Once, mother was so angry that she punished me by making me stand in the courtyard in just a single layer of clothing. I fell ill from the cold, and father was so worried that he came to mother's palace every day to check on me. After father left, mother stared at me for a long time, so long that I began to feel scared. Suddenly, she hugged me tightly as if she had found a treasure. The scent of powder and rouge from my mother's embrace reminded me only a sick Yang is useful. From then on, I often fell ill by the sickbed. My mother's makeup was exquisite, playing the role of an anxious, loving, yet still beautiful mother, which stirred my father's affection. Every time I recovered from an illness, my father's favor and rewards would arrive together. There were dazzling jewels and eye-catching silks. My mother would try on each piece in front of the mirror, admiring her own beauty. However, as more children were born in the palace, my father gradually lost patience with a prince who was always sick. My mother, the imperial consort, somehow obtained a secret medicine that was said to ensure her constant favor and prevent the emperor from having any more heirs. However, the secret medicine did not bring her favor. Instead, it cost her life. This time, I fell so ill that I was nearly at death's door, and even that was of no use. The emperor despised my mother, the imperial consort, and would not even see me in a very cold summer. The emperor only said to demote my mother to a commoner. But the empress secretly put arsenic in the commoner's food, yet, for some reason, as I stared fixedly at my mother vomiting blood, I didn't shed a single tear. Leaning against my mother's gradually cooling body, I carefully lay down and smiled contentedly for the first time. My mother did not push me away. She held me gently and tenderly in her arms for a long, long time, just as I had always hoped. After that, my life took a turn for the worse. I ate spoiled food and wore tattered clothes. I need to find myself a favored concubine. The high-ranking consorts are all very clever. No one is willing to associate with the child of a deposed consort, but I never considered following noble lady when, because she is too foolish. She clearly knows that bribing eunuch Cho with silver is like throwing meat buns to a dog. It was clear that Pei Yu simply refused to acknowledge her, yet she still carried the pastries and waited in the snow, hoping to catch a glimpse of Pei Yu. Everyone in the palace knew that the empress had no children of her own, so she had her eyes on consort Wen's child. The emperor also tacitly approved of the empress's intentions, so the fourth brother born to consort Wen was never registered under her name from the start. Otherwise, she wouldn't have given birth to a prince and still be an insignificant noble lady. In the past, she wasn't sent to the empress's palace to be raised because the empress still hoped to have a child of her own. You only deserve to eat this low-grade pastry. I could see right through her. She had never bullied anyone before and didn't know that real bullying meant throwing spoiled pastries on the ground and calling me lowly. The jujube flour cake in my hand is warm. I lowered my head and took a bite. It was very sweet, not a low-grade snack. Eunuch Cho told the empress that noble lady Wen went to see the fourth prince again today. This displeased the empress, who then told the emperor that consort Wen wanted a child, and that the third prince was still in need of a mother, and so, in a daze, I became consort Wen's child. But it didn't matter. I would first step on her to find myself a better mother. Perhaps because I was always watching my mother's expressions, I became very good at reading people. I know that Lady Wen wants to gain favor and wishes to have Pei Yu back. I know that my father dislikes the domineering nature of the central palace and desires a gentle, obedient, and virtuous queen who can serve as a model for the nation. It was not easy for my father to be captivated by her glance back on a snowy night, and he rewarded her with silks and jewels. I want her to dress up well and first solidify her favor. She had someone put away the jewelry, then crouched down, holding each piece of satin against me one by one. I'll work on these over the next few days, so Yang can have new clothes to wear before the festival. I stood there in a daze, holding the bolts of satin, so bewildered by her foolishness that I could barely speak. These are all for making clothes for me. Of course not. I breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed she wasn't beyond all hope of redemption. Of course, it's not just about making clothes. We also need to make knee pads, book bags, and more. Let me think carefully to see if I've missed anything. I wanted to make one last attempt. Yang is very clever. She won't let her mother fall out of favor, and she won't abandon her mother either, so you dress yourself up first to secure favor. She didn't understand my hint at all, just patted my head and told me she believed in my sincerity and wouldn't abandon me, but I don't want her anymore because she lacks the ability, and the empress easily took away the favor she had just gained. Yet she didn't get angry with me. Instead, she even gave me 2 oranges to warm my hands. Thinking about my late-night snack, furious, I pulled the quilt over my head and came up with another plan. I deliberately fell ill to make her go and invite my father. My father would surely be furious, thinking she had ulterior motives just like my mother, and would then assign me to another consort. But I miscalculated again. She didn't use my illness to win favor. Instead, she stayed up all night, anxiously watching over me by my bedside, her soft, slightly cool hand repeatedly checking my forehead with reddened eyes full of self-blame. She scolded herself for her carelessness. I stared at her blankly. It was the first time someone had shed tears for me. How strange. I wanted to say, "Don't cry, I deliberately framed you because I wanted to change to another mother," but what reached my lips was the gently blown, warm medicinal soup. I want to add one more thing. It's the warm, sweet roasted orange segments. It left me utterly speechless. No matter what, when my mother passed away, I didn't shed a single tear. I thought I had forgotten how to cry, but why, when I saw her eyes, did tears suddenly fall like rain? It must be that the medicine was too bitter. It must be that being sick was too painful. Otherwise, how could I blame that piece of orange for being too sweet? While she stayed up late making new clothes for me, I still wanted to sneak a few more glances at her, but the quilt didn't carry the strong scent of cosmetics. Instead, it had the faint fragrance of soap pods. It made me fall into a deep sleep without even realizing it. It seems Mother misunderstood. I didn't play with those brothers and companions because I found them foolish, especially Pei, whose foolishness is truly laughable. But Mother held the sugar painting, looking at me with eyes full of expectation. I sighed softly in my heart. All right, as long as she's happy. However, Mother's gentleness made the Emperor look at her in a different light. In the Queen's palace, he was a husband overshadowed by his wife's illustrious family. In the consort's palace, he was a ruler indulging in beauty and capriciousness. Here with Mother, he could be a father. From an ordinary family, I could sense the emotion in Father Emperor's eyes when he saw Mother surrounded by a group of children. Father, you see, the current Empress is not fit to be the mother of all under heaven. The struggles within the palace never cease for a moment. Arsenic is bitter and sour. To make someone consume it, they must either take it willingly or have it mixed with honey. I am well aware that the food Pei sent is poisoned, but Mother taught me if Yang doesn't want to give something, she doesn't have to. Mother belongs to Yang, and Yang doesn't want to give her away. Getting rid of one Pei isn't enough. Father wants to take in more concubines. If one day my mother falls out of favor, I will likely be assigned to another palace. It's fine. Arsenic can also be mixed into sweet soup. After ascending the throne, I brought my maternal grandparents to the capital, making it easier for them to visit my mother in the palace. After all, the warmth my mother gave to Yang wants to give it back to her. After all, the same soup, whether made in the palace or at home, is never quite the same. After hearing the two stories above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you like this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.